elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of Israel. And they presented themselves before God. And Joshua said to all the people, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. Now therefore revere the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your ancestors served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Now if you are unwilling to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord."
And now continuing in the scriptures in Joshua 24, verses 16 through 18. Then the people answered, "Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did these great signs in our sight. He protected us along all the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites who lived in the land, and therefore we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God."
Good morning. It is so good to be here with you, and I want to bring you greetings from, 59 other churches in this part of the state that we call Southwest Missouri, there I've got them both. And to bring you greetings from 239 other congregations across the state that we call the region of Mid-America. And I tell you that to let you know that you are not alone, and that there are other congregations that are meeting with the same Disciples of Christ banner written over their church, and to know that there are churches that are smaller than you and churches that are larger than you. But all together, we make up the Mid-America region. And I just want to say hello from all of them and from the other 3 regional ministers in this part of the world. Make sure I got the right thing and get my bifocals lined up. Sometimes it's kind of difficult. Okay, so in Joshua, how many of you know the story of Joshua? Okay, a couple. So what is interesting to me about the book of Joshua is that it is the book of the story of the Israelites. I mean, you know that, I'm sure. And they were trying to find a place to be. And we think about, a lot of times, the Old Testament and the Israelites as being the people of Yahweh, right? The people who worship this God, Yahweh, that we know as the Lord or Almighty, or however, same God for us and the people of the Old Testament. But what is difficult for us to understand sometimes is that in the Old Testament, not all of the people of God only worshiped Yahweh. And so we come to this today. Yahweh has brought them through this finding of the city of Jericho. They want, to take the city of Jericho. Remember, they marched around the city several times, and then they blew the horns and the walls fell, and God gave them great victory over these people that had been oppressing them, and victory over the, I was going to say the Syrians. I'm trying to remember if she read them. Among the foreign peoples. So you can say, okay, so God gave them victory over the Nebraska football team and K-State and, all those. And so you can pick whatever football team. In Nebraska, there's only one football team. And so when you come to, I came from Kansas, there was K-State and KU, and then of course there's Wichita State. And then when you come into Missouri, there's 40 different, right, football teams. So we can't all say we're part of one football team. But if I would take this little analogy, so what happens is that the people of Israel and the people of the old times, the Assyrians and all those kind of people, believed that their God was superior. And they all had different gods, all right? And some of them had multiple gods. And so what happens is that they would go out and smite the enemy. Isn't that a great word, smite? They would go out and smite the enemy, therefore proving that their God was better. And so then they would bring their God into the house of whomever, and then that the people that they smite them, okay, then would take that God to be their God because that God was superior, right? And so this is the problem that we have, is that Israel, who is supposed to be serving Yahweh, has been smited several times, and so they've got all these foreign gods that they have in their back in their repertoire, right? So they've got, not to that they just have the cross on the table. Behind over here, they've got a couple other things that they whip out whenever they lose, okay? So Joshua, they have finally, God has helped them to overcome, because, we're at the last book of this book, the last chapter of this book. And it says, Joshua assembled all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. Remember, there were 12 tribes, and they all were kind of, Bedouins wandering in the desert. And they were not agricultural people that stayed in one place, but they moved around, kind of like our native peoples in America before the English and Europeans came. And so they would move as the cattle or the sheep would have them. So Joshua sends out a call, and all the tribes bring all their tents, and they assemble at Shechem. Okay, everybody knows where Shechem is, right? Out in the desert to the right? Okay. So they get to Shechem, and he gets all the elders, the leaders, the judges, and the officials. Interesting. Each tribe had elders, leaders, and judges. Remember, this is before the time of David. There's no king. And so when they have some kind of issue or problem, a judge decides what the end result is. So we're talking about early Israelites. So they get all together and they present themselves to God. They worship. They assemble together to worship. And one of the ways that they worship is they build an altar, typically out of stone, because that's, and in Missouri you get that, right? What would we build an altar out of? Of course, out of stone, because we have lots of stone sitting around. And so Joshua says to them, long ago your forefathers, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the river and worshipped other gods. They worshipped long ago they worshipped other gods. Before Abraham, because Abraham is the one who called the people to worship Yahweh. And through the years, they've kind of lost it, and they've kind of been assimilated into a lot of different people and places, and they have all kinds of idols in their background. And so he says they worship these other gods. And then he drops down, there's this whole thing, he says, I brought Moses. He tells a story about Moses over, and Abraham did this, and blah, 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 and we all did that. And he says, and so he tells them their history, tells them all their history. But we're going to jump back in at 14. Now, fear the Lord, fear Yahweh. And this fear is not tremble, but be awesome. That be in awe of Yahweh. Be not afraid, so that you serve Yahweh, because if you don't, he's going to smite you. We get to use that word one more time. But be in awe of the power that he has. Be in awe of the things. I mean, this is the creator of the universe. I mean, do you ever think about that? That the God we serve, The God who wants relationship with us is the creator of the universe. And we're just little people. Even though we think we're big sometimes, we're really, you ever look at space? You've seen pictures from space, right? Looking down on the earth, can you see your house? But God knows us. And so he tells these people, be in awe of God, revere God, and serve him in all faithfulness. Throw away the gods of your forefathers. Get rid of them. The ones from Egypt, the ones from across the river, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose today. You're either for us or you're against us. And so we think about the day in which we live. And we think that we live in a Christian nation, right? We live in a Christian nation. Do we? Do we anymore? I don't think we do. Do you know that there are other countries sending missionaries to America today? To tell people, do you know that there are people in this city who've never heard about Jesus Christ? Fascinating, isn't it? Because every block there's a church. How can they not know about Jesus? Well, what they do know is they know that the Pennsylvania diocese has a lot of fraud in the church and misconduct. And what they know is that the big church with Bill Hybels has been taken down. And they know that Christians are not really who they say they are, because it's really hard to differentiate who's a Christian from who's not a Christian. I've been dealing recently with clergy misconduct. Not my favorite. Do you know that there are pastors that don't think they're different than anybody else? Now, we're not. We're not. But God has on us a higher calling. We are supposed to be like in a glass house. And yes, we sin, but we should try. We should try to follow Christ. And I think somehow we have gotten the idea or the understanding that it's okay to be in the culture and to be in the world. And I'm here to tell you it's wrong. Do you know there are people in your life, in your neighborhood, who look at you and say, now that's a Christian? What does that mean? There are people who look at you and say, oh, I want some of that, right? Or do they? Can they tell who you are? Do you stand out? Do people want to come to this congregation because of the mission and the works that you do for Christ? Do they want to come here because they know that you love each other? And they'll know we are Christians by our love, right? We need to be who we say we are. And we say that we are the Christian church. Disciples, learners of Christ. If somebody at your work said to you, are you a Christian? Would you tell them yes? If somebody at your work picked you out as a Christian, could that happen? Does your language reflect something different? Does your dress, does your life express love for other people? We have been told the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ, by somebody else. And so it's our opportunity then to share that. It's not a secret that we keep. It's something that we share with good news and gladness, something that we can say, this has made a difference in my life, and why this has made a difference in my life. The world needs us to share the good news. And just like Joshua says to his people, you're going to have to decide today who you serve. Do you serve Christ? Do you serve God? Do you serve Yahweh? Or do you serve the other idols? Now let's talk about idols. Okay, we can feel like we're pretty good because we don't have those little Buddhas and Assyrian gods and all that in our closet hidden, right? But we might. We might. Sometimes they're things like golf clubs or football jerseys. You know, things that we don't like to say are gods. But let me tell you what a God is. A God is anything that will take you from living the life with Christ. And so they're not bad things. You know, going to a football game is fun. Unless you go to one of the professional ones and you're up in the nosebleed and the players of this hall. Save your money, stay in your living room. It's so much more fun. And you don't have to wait for the bathroom. You know, football games in themselves, soccer games are not bad. Golfing is a good, I'm not a golfer. Didn't want to embarrass myself like that. It's a good sport. You get out and walk and all that kind of stuff. But when that takes the place every Sunday morning of worship, then it becomes an idol. When going to anything, Saturday night you stay out late so you can't come to worship. And it's not just about worship. It's also about Bible study and learning how to be a Christian. You see, it's not we just come Sunday and we go and we're done. You know, obligation fulfilled. Christianity is a lifestyle. It's something that we seek every day. And every day we have to fight with our own humanity that calls us away from serving the God that loves us. And so today I ask you, what God do you serve? What God do you serve? Me? Geoff? Our household? The priesthood? We're going to choose to serve Yahweh. And we would encourage you also to choose that God. Amen.